Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And joining us this morning, our old colleague, National Review's Noah Rothman. Welcome back, Noah.
Hi, John.
Let me tell you a story about a 17-year-old girl in Prairie Village, Kansas, attending the Shawnee Mission East High School, coming to school one day in 2017 to find Nazi graffiti sprayed all over the campus. And according to a local news channel I dug up last night, she saw the graffiti of swastikas and vulgar words, and she said to the reporter, "It's so ignorant that you would bring up a symbol like that would bring so much pain to people. It's not okay. You know, I worry about going to my synagogue, and now I have to worry about safety at my school, and that shouldn't be a thing." Move forward a few years in her timeline of her life, and the same 17-year-old ends up going to American University to get a master's degree in international studies and gets an additional master's degree in natural resources and sustainable development from the United Nations University of Peace. Didn't know that such a thing existed. On her LinkedIn page, after her MAs, she wrote, "My passion lies at the intersection of peace building, religious engagement, and environmental work. While working with Tech to Peace in Tel Aviv, Israel, I conducted comprehensive research on peace-building theory, emphasizing grassroots initiatives in the Israeli-Palestinian region. My diverse experiences, including facilitating insightful discussions on geopolitics in Israel and Palestine as a Jewish educator, and researching an array of environmental topics in India and Central America, reflect my commitment to fostering understanding between different peoples." This was Sarah Mgrim, and last night she was shot to death outside the Capital Jewish Museum. She was working at the Israeli embassy with her boyfriend and apparently soon-to-be fiancé, Yaron Lashitsky, and they were both shot multiple times by one Elias Gonzalez, himself a Midwesterner from Chicago, who apparently was a figure in what is called the Party of Socialism and Liberation. I bring this up only to say that Sarah Mgrim was a deeply idealistic person who believed that peace was possible between Israel and Palestine and the Palestinians, and wished to facilitate this in some manner. And this is how she conducted her life. She felt this way, probably in part because of the swastikas being painted at her high school, and that this was something that, there needed to be an answer to make sure that such horrors did not happen again. She dedicated her life to it. She went to work at the Israeli embassy to do work that she could help with, fell in love with Yaron Lashitsky, who was himself an interesting story, and was murdered nonetheless, despite her deep commitment to peace. What does this remind us of, or what does it remind me of? It reminds me of so many of the people in the three kibbutzim that were hit on October 7th, peace activists, leftists, seeking reconciliation and common understanding with the Palestinians in Gaza, that they employed them, and that in the case of at least one of those who was employed at Kfar Aza, I believe, or Be'eri, one of the two, drew plans, was there, worked with them, was a friend to them, and then he drew plans to provide a map for Hamas to know how to get in and what to do and where the safety points were and how to get the storehouse of guns and seize it so that they could go through and kill as many people as possible. So this is where we are with a terrorist attack on American soil last night at 10:45, about half a mile from the nation's capital and across the street from the FBI field office in Washington, D.C. This is where we are now.
Yeah.
I mean, in the nation's capital, in a Jewish cultural site, the Jewish Museum of Washington, an event, a diplomatic night sponsored by the American Jewish Committee. It's not at the embassy. This is
Not at a
Jews,
synagogue.
and
Also, not at a synagogue.
right, but it's Jews. It's not. Just Israel. It's not Israeli policy. It's Jews targeting Jews.
I'm discomfited a little bit by the degree to which participants in this event are emphasizing what it was for, right? It was for humanitarian aid to Gaza. There's a statement that was produced by Israel Aid where they say, we and all the attendees gathered in the interest of finding practical solutions to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and showing that working together is the only way forward for all the people in the region. I understand why they're doing it. But the implication there is that you got the wrong guys.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Right.
They did.
Yeah. Well, the
they
Capital
got exactly
Jewish
who they wanted.
Another point I wanted to add, which I forgot, and thank you, Noah, for that, is I did not know, oddly enough, about the existence of the Capital Jewish Museum, which is new, which was, I think, opened 2 years ago, and brought the building of the oldest synagogue in Washington, Adas Israel, the original building, and moved it on wheels on a truck from 6th Street to 3rd Street, and then built this modern pavilion around it. So it's a very elaborate, very expensive facility. And what does the website push? What does the website of the Capital Jewish Museum push? Upcoming exhibition, LGBT Jews in the Federal City. Educator Resources, Jewish American Heritage Month, featuring a picture on the website of the Freedom Seder, which was published in the 1960s, a sort of far-left Haggadah, guide to the Seder and Passover, written by one Arthur Waskow, one of the most prominent far-left figures in Washington over the last 50 years. And the Freedom Seder ends not with Jews saying, next year in Jerusalem, but next year in the free world. Doing the work of the nation features, which is a blog post, features a photograph of a black woman and a Jewish woman communing happily together. And so what does this tell us? This tells us that this is yet another example of the idea among many American Jews that to be Jewish in America is to be a member not only to be liberal, but also to be kind of left. And that seems to be sort of Sarah Mgrim's story, though, of course, obviously openly Zionist, working at the Israeli embassy with an Israeli boyfriend that she was, the ambassador, Yechiel Leiter, said last night, had a ring in his pocket and was getting ready to propose to her in Jerusalem next week. One of the reasons that he would not propose to her this week is that it is the counting of the Omer, that is the period between Passover and Shavuot, which the holiday that comes and is celebrated as the time that Moses gives the Torah to the people Israel. And this is considered a sort of a period of mourning, and you're not supposed to have happy occasions through the counting of the Omer, or there are certain types of things you're not supposed to do if you are very religious, which apparently he was not. That's what something else to get to. But my point is that, as Noah would say, it doesn't matter what a Jew is. It doesn't matter if a Jew is left-wing or right-wing. It doesn't matter if a Jew is trying to get food into Gaza or wants to kill every last Palestinian. The people who target, who are engaged in acts of violent resistance against the existence of Jewry and Israel will shoot you no matter who you are. Shoot you in the back of the head. Come from Chicago to shoot you in the back of the head. And Jews in America better get right with this fact, because every now and then you hear people saying things like, well, that it's white supremacists in America that are a threat. And indeed, it's true that the 2 synagogue attacks in Poway, California, and in Pittsburgh in 2018-2019 were conducted by white supremacists. But there was also an attack on a synagogue in Texas in 2022 by an Islamic extremist.
Yeah, and there's been an ongoing anti-Jewish campaign in America's universities and cities since October 8th, 2023, within 24 hours of the Hamas pogrom in Israel on October 7th. I think one point I'd like to make is I was reminded as you and Noah were talking about Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement on the death of the scholar Michael Ledeen. And I had just read the statement, and Netanyahu was close with Michael, and he in his memorial that he posted on X, Netanyahu wrote this about Ledeen, quote, "He understood a basic truth that many seek to ignore. You must understand the cultures and values of the people driving current affairs to correctly assess the threats and opportunities they present." Close quote. And I think that quote is relevant to what we're discussing because to this moment, even in the aftermath of this heinous act, too few people actually understand the cultures and values of the Palestinian movement. I mean, the Hamas movement, what Hamas wants, what it means to accuse Israel of these crimes against humanity. It's not a state. It's the extinction of Israel. It's the death of Jews. That's what Hamas and its supporters want. And until you recognize that, you're going to be morally and intellectually disarmed and shocked and paralyzed by what happened last night in Washington. And the second point I'd like to make is more general, which is this is now within the year. We have two of these instances of what was known in the 19th century as propaganda of the deed. We had last year the Luigi Mangione killing of the United Healthcare worker, shot again in the back, while the CEO of United Healthcare, was leaving to attend a convention. And what we saw there was, in fact, the lionization of Mangione from the far left, and even a more mainstream apologetics about his murderous deed. And now we have this. And this is an extremely troubling trend, as if the trends weren't already troubling. But the fact is that the radical left, the portions of this pro-Palestinian movement in the United States, are adopting murder and terror as tactics. And that has to be stopped.
No, I would add.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure, Dave.
Just detail the story that connects the this idea that, of course, this wasn't some random schizophrenic who thought Jews were listening to him through the radio or something. He pulled out a keffiyeh and yelled "Free, free Palestine." So I just want to make it emphasize that the line between the anti-Israel animus that we've been seeing since October 7th, the line between that and the killing is direct and straight.
Yeah, and to that point, just how clear and plain that these killers make their associations, I would add the firebombing of Governor Josh Shapiro's home, which establishes a direct connection between the extent to which the Democratic establishment attempted to placate this violent movement in search of a justification for the violence that they're already inclined toward, and the extent to which that they feel motivated to lash out at figures like Josh Shapiro. There was a whisper campaign against him and his vice presidential ambitions. We all were privy to it. We all know, the dark elements of it. And if that just kind of barely registers with us, it's a really impossible to ignore signal to people who are inclined to this kind of anti-Semitic violence. John, you had me write a piece in the December 2023 issue. The anti-Jewish violence is happening, which, it seems quaint now to look back on it because a lot of it was limited to campuses, but there were plenty of leading indicators. A knife-wielding assailant who ran into a Studio City, California home because he saw a mezuzah on the door, a Minneapolis man who was assaulted with caustic substances because he accidentally drove into a demonstration, an anti-Israel demonstration, and on and on and on. The record is there for people who want to see it, but so many didn't.
Let's talk about the mood out of the last week, from which Elias Gonzalez emerged from the sewer of his.
John, I know you're naming him, and often
sorry.
we don't name terrorists, but you're naming him incorrectly. His last name is Rodriguez.
Oh, Rodriguez. I'm so sorry.
I don't even like correcting you on this matter.
No, I'm having a bad week on naming.
I don't want us to get into any trouble.
Yeah, Elias Rodriguez emerges at a point in time. And what is this point in time? It comes at a point when Israel has decided that it must move militarily to end the war in Gaza. There's a great deal of controversy in Israel about prioritizing that over the return of the hostages. Bibi Netanyahu made a speech in which he said, this is the only way that we can get the hostages to return, to pummel Hamas so severely that they finally say, we're giving up and we're going to give you back the hostages in exchange for our lives if we can go into exile. That is the strategy, right? That is happening. And what is the world's response to this after 18 months? The world's response is Britain, France, and Canada announced they are going to take concrete measures against their deeply beloved ally, Israel. We have the Secretary of State, who made a very strong and forthright statement, as everyone in the Trump administration was fantastic last night. But it remains the fact that Marco Rubio went to Capitol Hill and said the Israelis went too far, are going too far, or haven't let enough aid in, and things were bad and it wasn't good. And campus commencements over the last week, I was told yesterday, totally unrelated, somebody who went to both the Barnard and Columbia commencements. Barnard was Tuesday and Columbia was yesterday, right? They're across the street from each other. They're sister schools, Barnard and Columbia. So the president of Barnard, 99% or something like that of the students graduating refused to shake the hand of the president of Barnard as they were getting their diplomas, as a matter of deliberate choice, because she had suppressed this demonstration on the campus 3-4 weeks ago and had a couple of people arrested, had brought in the cops and had a couple of people arrested because they were, starting to occupy the building. And at the Columbia demonstration, you had people hissing, yelling, booing. The interim president, Claire Shipman, is not somebody I think particularly highly of. People burning, Columbia graduates coming back to campus to burn their diplomas and to generally make this event, which is supposed to be a commemorative event for 4 years of getting through college and graduating, into a nightmarish puddle of chaos. And what happens the night after the scene at Columbia in Morningside Heights, a mile and a half from where I'm sitting? Elias goes and shoots 2 people in the head.
And the thing about the Columbia commencement is Shipman, true to form in her incompetence and lack of depth, defended Mahmoud Khalil in her speech.
She was sorry that fellow graduate Mahmoud Khalil was not with.
Couldn't be there because of his free speech.
Yeah.
Denouncing Israel.
I want to remind people that Mahmoud Khalil, who is still in jail in Louisville, Kentucky, I believe, he is in jail in Louisville, Kentucky by choice because he is refusing. He could be out of jail, or he's in Georgia somewhere. I'm sorry. He could be out of jail and on a plane out of the United States any second he wishes, but is choosing to remain in jail as a martyr to the cause of what will be his eventual deportation, as he has no grounds to contest his deportation because the law gives the power to the Secretary of State, the aforementioned Marco Rubio, to deport anyone whom he believes is inimical to the interests of the United States. And as Rubio told the Senate this week and the House both, that power is not anything that a judge can interfere with. There's no exceptions in the law. It's pretty absolute. You do not have a right to be in the United States on a student visa. It is a privilege, and the privilege can be withdrawn from you if it is determined that your behavior is bad. Our friend Annie McCarthy, by the way, sent me this just before we got to air, 18 U.S. Code 2331. And he says basically this event can be characterized as an act of international terrorism and can pull off and can therefore trigger uh, very significant penalties to anybody related to this event. The term international terrorism, it says, means activities that involve violent acts or acts dangerous to human life that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or of any state, appear to be intended, one, to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, two, to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or three, to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, and kidnapping, and C, occur primarily outside the jurisdiction of the United States or transcend national boundaries in terms of the means by which they are accomplish the persons they appear intended to intimidate or coerce, or the locale in which their perpetrators operate or seek asylum. The term person means any individual or entity capable of holding a legal or beneficial interest in property. The term act of war means any act occurring in the course of a declared war, an armed conflict, or an armed conflict between military forces. The term domestic terrorism means acts that are dangerous to human life that are a violation of the criminal laws in this state. In other words, this is a terrorist act. The law says it's a terrorist act, and anybody with whom Elias was, or Elias, or however we pronounce his name, was associated, if we discover associations, and anyone who is deemed to have encouraged his actions, the statute is triggered. So it's not just that you have to be materially involved. If from this moment forward you say, hey, that was a cool thing that he did at that museum, you should be in the crosshairs of Pam Bondi's Department of Justice and interim prosecutor Janine Pirro, both of whom were on that stage last night with Muriel Bowser, the mayor of D.C., and Yechiel Leiter, the Israeli ambassador to the United States.
Deputy Director FBI Dan Bongino's on the case, giving very strong posts on Twitter as well. I'm going to continue returning to this theme, but it just so happened that today's Wall Street Journal has an op-ed by a professor of sociology named Jukka Savolainen, entitled "The Alienated Knowledge Class Could Turn Violent." And what the professor in the op-ed is saying is going back to the emergence of the Weather Underground and the Baader-Meinhof gang and all of the terrorist groups of the 1970s, and drawing a parallel with what is happening on the left today. You have this large number of people, sometimes referred to as midwits, people who think they're educated, but they're really not. Instead, they're just steeped in this anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-Western civilizational ideology. They're consumed by what I've called the omni-cause, right? Whether it is radical environmentalism, radical race theory, radical anti-Zionism, and anti-Semitism. And they are increasingly turning to violence. And so I mentioned Mangione, but let's not forget the attacks on Tesla dealerships, the firebombing of everything associated with Elon Musk.
Individual Tesla cars.
Vandalizing individual Tesla electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Right? The trans violence we're seeing with the radical trans activists going after institutions and individuals they believe to be hostile to them. We had a moment, and I was hoping that the 2024 election would be this kind of re-norming of America. But it's the radicalism, the revolutionism that Abe has written about. It is still there. And the other parallel, not just the 1960s and 70s, is also the late 19th century Russia, where the intelligence, as Saul Morson has written so eloquently, turned into nihilist terrorists, and we're beginning the groundwork for the Russian Revolution, eventually the Bolshevik Revolution. So this has to be of extremely pressing concern, and not just for Jews, who, as always, are the first targets, but for anyone who understands that it never ends with Jews, and that the larger goal is simply anti-civilizational, and it has to be combated.
Well, Dostoevsky's point, right, the great portrayer of this trend in 19th century terrorism, right, is that it is nihilist, it is anti-life, it is about the
Right.
destruction of life. And there's this other event, right, this bombing in Palm Springs,
Yeah, the fertility clinic just last weekend,
by
right.
the anti-natalist who
Right.
wants humanity to end.
Yes.
Because humans are destructive. So you start with the Jews, you get to the general population, and then you just get to the world.
Well, and what was what was God's commandment? Choose life. Choose life.
That's right. So I do think that Noah and Abe were both extraordinarily prescient. Noah started writing about the leftist taste for blood in 2016, in both on the website and in the pages of the magazine. Right, the sort of a kind of rumble in San Jose, California, as I recall.
And my first book, which was published in 2017. No, started writing in 2017, published in early 2019 on social justice.
Yeah. So that social justice warriors are in fact warriors. It's not necessarily a term of art or that kind of thing. Like, let's fight. We're going to fight, meaning, we're going to yell and write op-eds and then go home and have pasta. Like, it is for a small but not tiny percentage of people who define themselves in this way. October 7th represented the moment in which the switch was turned on, and in which, if they were in a paddock or in a barn, the barn door was opened and they could flood out. And where did that come from? Yeah, it comes from the over creation, or that this brilliant op-ed that you mentioned talks about essentially kind of overproduction of elites who find it very difficult to work and get fulfilled employment in the world after graduation, because there are too many of them chasing too few jobs. Well, and that then only adds to the notion that the country is evil and unjust to them.
Radicalization is a temptation among those who live the life of the mind, right? That is just ever present. And if you take their own raison d'etre and their rationale to its logical conclusion, you would resolve. The trap is one of two things happen to you, because you've resolved that the fundaments of this system are immoral and unjust and in dire need of radical reform, right? And just the instruments of politics will not facilitate that objective. So one of two things happens to you, right? You get really depressed and you drop out of the system. You say, I'm wash my hands of it because it's just not responsive to your, moral imperatives. The other is to radicalize and to resolve to attack the foundations of this wholly unjust and immoral system that is unresponsive to what you regard to be, the most important things that you can imagine, that to which you have to work for your entire life, or you're an immoral person. That's the sort of temptation that most people can avoid, but not everybody can. Particularly those who have this kind of social circles where you're cloistered in them and you work yourself up into a froth over these things, and are constantly encountering the incentives to engage in rhetorical one-upmanship. Everybody has to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more energized, a little bit more enthusiastic, a little bit less compromising. And it's a self-reinforcing cycle that produces these kind of violent elements with so much frequency that it's impossible to ignore. It should be impossible to ignore unless you yourself are resolved to ignore it.
Right. Abe?
I think, can you say, I think also it can't be overstated how much 2020 and the events of that year sort of trained a generation for this. That's when mass violence in the name of a cause became not only permitted but celebrated. And that's when you saw officials responding to this violence, bending to it, coming around to the side of the revolutionaries. That's when everyone masked up to go out and do their worst in public. That's never gone away. That's remained an element in all this, and that is also when the atmosphere in America became strange enough to begin to break every norm, and that is still we haven't sort of snapped back into shape since that year.
I mean, we're trying, and I think that was what 2024 was about. But you're absolutely right. We haven't snapped back into shape. And there was another anecdote on a separate issue that I heard the other day that illustrates this, which is the new director of the National Institutes of Health, Jay Bhattacharya, was holding a town hall meeting with his employees. And in the course of this town hall meeting, he was talking about how NIH should not fund any gain-of-function research. And he said that there is the potential that NIH funding through Peter Daszak and Daszak, right?
Now I get to correct you.
Yeah, I know. That's good. I knew I was on a ledge there. I was hoping you'd do it, but it was close.
Yeah. The Eco Health Alliance.
Eco Health Alliance that Jim Meigs has written about so brilliantly for us may have actually contributed to the research at the Wuhan lab from which COVID originated. At that point, according to reports, and you can hear it on the audio, many NIH staffers walked out, stood up, turned their backs to Bhattacharya, and left. And the reporters, the radio reporter telling the story noted they were all wearing masks.
Yeah.
So that syndrome, the masks are actually a good sign. You can tell who has succumbed to the syndrome that is slowly eating away our civilizational immune system, right? And cannot perceive basic moral reality or common sense, that they would be wearing that mask indoors in May 22, 2025, and then have the gall to not just say, oh, well, there he goes again, that guy who thinks
I'm doing this for myself. Like, I have to admit, I'm a little nervous, and
but it's a political statement, right? Yeah. It's to wear that mask now is a political statement, or it's a sign, like Noah just said, that you are so drowned in this culture of the left that you can't even perceive the alternatives. But then to get up and walk away. And another example. That yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled on its shadow docket that a Maine state legislator, had to have her free speech rights restored. This is an elected state legislator from a district in Maine whose free speech rights had been stripped from her. She could not vote. She could not speak on the state house floor of the Maine lower chamber. Why? Because she had the temerity to write a Facebook post suggesting that biological men should not participate in women's sports. And for that, the Democrats in the Maine State House deprived her of a basic constitutional right, which, by the way, free speech is important. It's even more important in a legislature. That's why you have to that the whole point of a legislature is to debate and to talk, right? They're saying she could not talk until she apologized to the quote unquote trans community. So it's this radical vision, this deadly vision, and then the second you challenge the vision, you're censored.
Yeah. And what happened in the vote at the Supreme Court? Which
7-2.
7-2. Why not 9-0? Because Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor are like, well, why are we even told? Why are we?
Yeah, it's interesting. Sotomayor did not even write a dissent. Yeah. Which I'm always happy when she decides not to write. Yeah. But Justice Jackson, interestingly enough, voted no solely on procedural grounds, and in fact says it's likely that the plaintiff is going to win the case. But even there, it should be 9-0. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. I mean, Kagan voted.
Kagan, right? Yeah.
So anyway, but I mean, it's interesting. The reason I bring it up is only to say that, fine. So Sotomayor wouldn't say why, and Jackson hid behind procedural matters, and they voted against it because they're part of that consensus.
No, you're right.
Clearly, they will vote whatever represents the dominant liberal view on matters. They will reflect. It's their job to reflect that view, even if it goes to something as absolutely open and shut as the notion that the Maine State House is not allowed to silence somebody who is an elected representative of the people of Maine. You can censure somebody.
Sure.
You can even expel somebody. There are procedures, I'm sure, in the Maine state constitution that grant the power of expulsion for heinous acts. They're probably laid out specifically in the law. So I'm sure saying something about trans doesn't trigger it. Maybe being convicted of a crime or something does trigger the possibility of expulsion. But there is a modality under which legislatures can remove people or criticize them.
Yeah, censure.
Not disallow them from voting. That is disenfranchisement of the people
who voted
for them.
And on top of it all, the people who do this, the Maine speaker and the people who stomp out in protest of Jay Bhattacharya, they all think that they are defending democracy. Right,
Walter Russell Mead's point in another
excellent op-ed
the other day in the Wall Street Journal, which is that everybody is now acting, or not everybody, a certain brand of received opinion, both here and in Europe and elsewhere, is acting as though democracy is fragile. And the fact is, democracy, particularly in the United States, is the hardiest system on earth, as long as there are checks and balances. We have now what is likely, outside of Switzerland, the longest lived government on the face of the earth, governed by the same constitution that was written and passed and amended 134 years ago, right? Or 136 years ago. Like, that is how the United States is governed under the same constitution, with emendations, but no fundamental alterations. Democracy is strong. Republican democratic government is strong, not weak. It can withstand. It does not need silencing. It does not need disinformation departments hunting down examples of people who say things about COVID that might get people killed, in your opinion, who are in fact saying the things that won't get people killed.
And the obvious thing. I know I'm correcting you today. I don't want to, but it's like 230 years. The Constitution was
1791, right?
1789 was when the Constitution was ratified.
Right.
And
Yes, 230. Okay, so 230.
You said 130. I just don't want.
Oh my God!
I don't want the emails have been flooding in all week.
I was up all night
because it's assumed that we're all enumerate. We're in this business.
I know John does math,
but I was up all night. Just to be fair, and I was reading up on this. And
your piece was brilliant and excellent. And
I have a thank you. I have a post up at Commentary that I put up at about midnight last night. But I was up all. My dog was also having a total lunatic fit because there was a rainstorm and was keeping us up all night. Anyway, so I apologize for that.
I'd say something about that point, about the Walter Russell Mead point.
Your dog? How was your dog?
No. My dog's
your dog
fine.
is fine? Okay.
Fine, yeah. Rain doesn't get her. Trucks, hissing bus brakes.
Yeah, same
scare
with
the
me.
daylights out of her.
I feel the same way. Okay.
About Walter Russell Mead's point about the strength of democracy. That is strong. I think what is fragile is the culture of classical liberalism. Is keeping the people within a democratic republic liberty-minded, liberal-minded, liberal in the classical sense. The temptation to stray and break that all down within the bounds of a ongoing democracy, that's the danger, and that's what we're watching. It's not a threat to democracy. It's a threat to liberal thought and ideals.
Well, look, one of the excuses for the radicalization of the Russian intelligentsia in the last quarter of the 19th century was, of course, that they were not living in a democracy. They were living in a relatively enlightened, system dominated by a Tsar, right? Alexander II was a relatively enlightened czar. He liberated the serfs. He allowed for certain certain elements of free speech and stuff like that. And when he was assassinated in 1881, his son Alexander III then slammed the door on all liberalism as a security measure for his own and his family's safety. That ultimately ended up they met assassins' bullets in 19. Well, that was actually his son Nicholas, but following the policies of his father. Anyway, I think what the other thing to be said here, if we're going into other things that connect with this, is so I am not a fan. In fact, I'm repulsed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I think his vaccine ideas are horrific and terrible. But, and here's the big but the decision yesterday or the day before yesterday to say that it will be the recommendation of the Department of Health not to vaccinate young children for COVID, or not to you. It's not even really a vaccination.
Not to recommend, right?
What?
It's just not to recommend, is it?
Not to recommend. Thank you very much. Not to recommend that kids be vaccinated for COVID. And Catherine Wu at the Atlantic wrote a piece about how, oh my God, it's happening. It's not just measles. Now they're coming after COVID. Children should not be vaccinated for COVID when it was determined that children over the age of 5 had to be vaccinated for COVID. At the time that was happening, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, when 1 million people were on the way to dying, the total number of people between the ages of 0 and 18 who had died from COVID was less than 1,000 out of 1 million.
You know who's most likely to reject that empirically defensible observation? The misinformation reporters. I saw tons of reporters, actually journalists, who were talking about how relieved they were to get their infant children, young children, vaccinated at the height of the pandemic, assuming they had never encountered this information about it, how the low lethality when it comes to childhood infections of COVID-19. But maybe they just didn't process it. Maybe it just washed right over them, like the androids in that book, where they're looking at their own schematics and they don't know what they're looking at. So they're not programmed to see it. Like, they just can't process it.
The other thing about the COVID vaccine, just to since we're doing sort of compendium. So the one piece of data that came out about the COVID vaccine that was a warning sign, and that I think both Pfizer and AstraZeneca both said, was that there were signs in the data that for young men between the ages of 15 and 30, in select cases, but enough that it was statistically observable in the longitudinal studies of the mRNA vaccine, that there could be heart issues related to the vaccine. And again, you're talking about a cohort in which almost nobody died. The older you got, the more likely you were to get sick and die. And obviously and if you had associated morbidities like obesity or diabetes or things like that, that's where you could start saying, well, it may be better be safe than sorry. Even if there's a small risk, it's probably better to take the COVID vaccine than not. But it wasn't just taking the COVID vaccine, because we all know that the COVID vaccine is not impregnable. Like, that's why you kept getting boosters. It was this question of whether or not we're going to spend our entire lives getting the next version and the next version and the next version, and that a not inconsiderable number of people were getting sick from the boosters. Now, were they being protected from COVID? Maybe, but COVID then was weak. COVID's now weak. People get it. I have friends who get it. They come back, they have it for 4 days. They're not even sick, but they test positive for it. They get a sore throat, they test positive for it, and then it goes away. in 4 or 5 days. So this is part of the cognitive madness that can grip people, and it's worse the more educated you are, which is, I think, the point that the op-ed by the Wayne State University professor, whose name I'm not even going to try, given my problem with names. This brilliant op-ed in the Wall Street Journal makes the point that you can be gripped by irrationality as a result of the courting of your pretentiousness, or the idea that you are a person who knows the difference and has a sophisticated understanding of things, not like these yahoos who are like, if I don't need to get a shot, I'm not going to get a shot. Like, that's something I do. That's an
What you're
unnatural
describing,
thing,
so
not
that
a
we can bring
natural
this
thing.
all back to the murders last
Yeah.
night, because what you're describing is the mentality that conspiracy theorists subscribe to, that they are sufficiently enlightened that they can peel back the curtain and see the hideous hidden workings of the world that the average person simply cannot. And conspiratorial thought invariably leads to anti-Semitism, tends to, I should say, but tends very often, insofar as that conspiracy is the essential conspiracy theory, that there is this cabal, a secretive, empowered, omniscient yet ill-defined cabal that has stolen from you that which is your due, or that is meting out horrors and engineering disasters for their benefit and at your detriment.
It's
This
just
is the essential conspiracy theory.
the bottom line for me is the supporters of Hamas killed an Israeli mother on a highway last week, mother of 4, carrying another child, and then they kill 2 young people, one of whom is an Israeli Christian.
Right, that's right. So that's the Yaron
Yaron was,
Levitsky
yeah,
is a Christian.
but he's Israeli, and he was attending a Jewish event at a Jewish cultural center, and the dehumanization of Jews as part of this politics organized to eliminate the state of Israel, rid the Middle East of Jews, and take the Intifada global, is despicable wherever it happens. And so, if there's a public policy response here, it's obviously to enforce the rule of law and get to the bottom of this particular case. But it's more broadly what Danielle Pletka advised commentary readers last year, which is to smash the anti-Semitism network. And I have to say, that is what the Trump administration is trying to do. You might not like the way they're doing it, but that is what they're trying to do. I wish they also extended that attempt to smash the anti-Semitism network to Qatar, which is behind a lot of it. But let's take our gains where we can and focus on the institutions here in the United States and in the universities, and with these students who are behind the Tentifada and the harassment of Jews on America's campuses.
Can I just talk a little about this as well? Because this is one of these moments. We are standing at a hinge moment because we don't know what the knock-on effects of this will be. Like, you connected it to Luigi Mangione, which I think is a very acceptable thing to do. If someone shoots somebody in the back on a street and is lionized, and people are like writing songs and
For political reasons.
Right, for political reasons.
In ideology.
Right? And you're Elias sitting there in Chicago and going, boy, that's cool. I feel the same way. His website, the website of his party for socialism and liberation, is about smashing capitalism. What is Luigi Mangione's purpose? Is to smash capitalism in the form of taking out an individual healthcare executive as a symbol. And what do they have in common? By the way, Mangione and Elias, they have no records as far as we know. They've never been involved in illegal activity before. You can find Elias's LinkedIn page. He works for the American Osteopathic Information Association, graduate of the University of Illinois at Chicago, and he is a member of this very radical, very extreme split, whatever fringe group, that nonetheless, it only takes one, right? That's the thing about terrorism. It only takes one or 19 working in a group to kill 3,000 people, right? In
I mean,
2001,
not to be a complete partisan hack here, but what did so many progressive lawmakers do in the wake of the killing of the United Healthcare CEO? They did the bad, but right.
but
Elizabeth Warren, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Chris Murphy, on and on and on, trying to glom on to what they saw as this online movement. Anytime they see any zeal online for their cause, they just rush to embrace it,
right.
totally heedlessly. What did these same people do over the course of the 2024 election campaign when confronted with these nihilistic pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas demonstrators? They have a point, right? Yeah, sure, but Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, what's the distinction between they have a point for the violent pro-Hamas demonstrators and Luigi Mangione and his bloodletting act of human sacrifice? You can understand where they're coming from. Why wouldn't that incentivize more murders?
But I think that's the point, is now we've had 2 in 3 months, and the blood is in the water. And the question is, what happens now? Because this is how it starts. This is how waves of terrorism start. And we have been sitting here saying for years, it's not 1968. It's not 1968. It's not 1968. It's not the SDS. It's not 1968. Maybe it's 1968.
Especially if you throw in the assassination attempts on Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
Assassination attempts on Trump and the attempt to burn Josh Shapiro and his family alive in a fire. Right? I mean, those are 2 assassination attempts. You can't say that setting Shapiro's mansion on fire was not an assassination attempt. It happened at 2:00 in the morning while they were sleeping. They could have been, who knows what pattern the fire might have taken that could have killed them. It's no joke. So yeah, Trump, 2 assassination attempts on Trump in the space of 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I can't even remember now when the golf course one was after Butler. So assassination attempts, individual acts of terrorism. And the point here is now that the FBI is going to have to look in to see whether Elias was part of some network. He's part of a party. Does he have a manifesto? He's alive. So, that's a very big deal that he's alive and said, I did it on tape. So he can, of course, go into a courtroom and plead not guilty and refuse to speak. But he's already said he did it and he's proud of it. And he said, free Palestine. So maybe he'll open up and tell everybody what happened. Who knows? I think that hinge moments are very important because what ifs. So what if Kamala Harris had won in November? Would the statements of the Harris administration in response to an event like this have been as forthright and unapologetic and strong and harsh as the Trump administration's? The statement by Rubio, the statement by the president himself, the statement by Kash Patel, the statement by Pam Bondi. And what do they all say? That even Alexandria Ocasio, they said, this is an act of anti-Semitism, Jew hate. We are going to hunt down and combat the evil of anti-Semitism on our shores before things get worse. And that's why we're doing what we're doing on college campuses. That's not only why they're pursuing, Mahmoud Khalil and various other people. It's why they are suing Harvard, why they are withholding funds from Columbia and Harvard, but hundreds of millions of dollars, why they are going to use Title VI against universities for unequal treatment of Jewish students. And none of that, in my view, I mean, obviously, Harris administration would condemn the event, and like the FBI director would say, we stand at the ready to do whatever. But they would say, hate has no place here.
Here's an illustration of that.
And it is us. That's the point. It is us.
Here's the Leo Terrell, who now works at the DOJ as part of the anti-Semitism task force. And he posted on X 2 hours ago, quote, "This goes far beyond the murder of 2 individuals. It reflects a systemic crisis of anti-Semitism seen in the shooter's hatred the failure to enforce hate crime statutes, the institutions that help shape him, and the media narratives that normalize or excuse anti-Semitism. This is not an isolated act. It is a result of a society that has allowed anti-Semitism to fester unchecked. This must stop now. I can't think of a better statement.
Right.
I think he just sums it up right there. And I can tell you, the Harris administration would not have released that statement. It would have been obviously they would have released a statement that was, deploring the act, deploring anti-Semitism, but would have not gone to the structure of it, the systemic, the word systemic crisis, which I think is absolutely the case, and has policy choices that need to be made to fight it.
And it would have been anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
That's right.
Well, to be fair, Kamala Harris has issued a statement this morning, and it does say, condemns a shocking act of anti-Semitic violence. I stand with the Jewish community, condemning this sickening violence. Anti-Semitism and violence have no place in our country. It does, however, end, we must all come together and fight hatred.
Right.
Hatred.
Right.
So that's the whole point about anti-Semitism, is that it is not hatred. It is the world's oldest hatred. It is a very specific form of hatred that has a different etiology from other hatreds, which are not genocidal, right? Other forms of hatreds are, again, anti-life. They are monstrous. They are dehumanizing. They are vicious. They take people and look at them as tokens, right? That's terrible. Jews are among the very few people on this planet who are targeted for being Jews. And even if they're mistakenly targeted for being Jews in a weird way, like Yaron Lashitsky, who is not Jewish, he's an Israeli, and he is working at the Israeli embassy, but he's not a Jew. I don't quite know how this works in his case. He was born in Nuremberg, Germany. We know from Ambassador Ron Prosor, who was his teacher at Reichman in Israel, formerly IDC Herzliya, and knew him in part because he is the current ambassador to Germany for Israel. But that just adds another wrinkle. Like if you even consort with Jews or hang out with Jews or a part of the world of Jews, you are as a Jew to people.
Or the distinction doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
right. The shooter didn't know.
Yeah,
he just wanted to kill Jews.
Right.
Assembled at a Jewish event.
Right. And what happened, by the way, after he shot them? He shot them, threw the gun into a bush, and then went in the building.
To declare his allegiance.
No. 15 minutes. Went into the building. He sat down on a bench, looking extraordinarily nervous and sort of out of sorts and freaked out. And 3 or 4 people sat down next to him and said, "Are you okay? Do you need some water? Are you all right? Is everything all right?" And then he jumped up after 15 minutes, said, "I did it," pulled the keffiyeh out of his shirt, said, "Free, free Palestine." And then the security guards came in and grabbed him. He was inside the building. Had he had the gun with him, he could have kept shooting. For some reason, he threw it away. We don't know. He did something that had been in his brain that he finally, executed, and then he didn't know what to do with the excess energy that he had, and went inside to be comforted by the people he wanted to murder, who comforted him. It beggars belief. But I think the point that you're making about Leo Terrell and Kamala Harris's statement and all that, this is very important because there is going to be pushback. It's going to be in 48 hours that this is going to trigger Islamophobia. People are going to, even though it does not appear that he is a Muslim himself, but this will trigger Islamophobia, and we need to stand resolutely against.
And there will be context. There was context on my NPR hate podcast this morning where they said this shooting took place while Israel was under immense pressure and allowed in the 93 trucks. And amazingly, as Seth was saying on the show yesterday, None of the trucks actually got to the civilians who want the food or need the food. All the food goes to the terrorists who are still there, embedded and hiding. But nonetheless, that's immediately well, we have to set this act in the broader background of Israel's war against Hamas, and people are beginning to recognize that Israel is just going on too far, right?
Yeah.
That's also similar to the Mangione shooting, right? I mean, it was like
same thing.
This is what it's terrible, but we need to talk about what's
America's
going on.
healthcare system.
We need to have a conversation.
Right. Yeah.
We were talking earlier about masking, right? And the extent to which masking went from being an act of self-preservation into a symbol of menace. And it was regarded as that. Free protection of free expression notwithstanding, there are certain places and times and manners in which you cannot have a mask because it is associated with petty criminality, for example. What point do we get to that with the keffiyeh? The keffiyeh is a symbol of terrorism. It is adorned by people who want to shield their identity from investigators because they're behaving in ways that are either proscribed or illegal. At what point do we begin to talk about this thing as though it is, again, symbols of free expression notwithstanding, a declaration of intent to engage in criminality and violence?
Well put.
I mean, there used to be a slew of state laws against covering your face in public because that
the
means,
Klan. They're targeting the Klan.
Yeah.
Right.
And we now see the new 21st century manifestation of the Klan.
Yeah.
In the keffiyeh masking thugs who harass, terrorize, and now murder Jews and their allies.
So watch as everybody is issuing a statement saying how heartbroken they are. AOC, Chris Van Hollen, all sorts of anti-Israel, unspeakable anti-Semitic legislators, nonetheless expressing their shock and outrage that this has no place and all of that. Let's see how they respond when action starts to be taken. Because what do we let's see? We know how they're going to respond. And that is another reason why hinge moment that this represents, it's one of those moments in which I can say, thank God that Trump was elected, despite everything that I'm deeply worried and concerned about. Because they're going to go at this. And the idea of, well, you know what, this is really not that great for us because it's going to inflame, let's talk seriously behind closed doors. Like, this is going to inflame people that we need on our side in a low turnout midterm election that we're going to need to pull out. And, we need the party united because also, Hitler is in the White House and controlling his black shirts. And so we have to stay united, and we can't be attacking other people on the left.
Harris did not appear in public with Netanyahu when he visited.
Right.
She skipped the speech. She met with him in private.
In 2024, right.
Last year.
Yeah.
She skipped his speech to Congress. She met with him in private. And then she came out of that meeting and read a ridiculous statement to the press.
Right.
And then, of course, she didn't take any questions and she went back to her next event. And so just imagine if she were president right now. We would be with the UK and with France and in Spain trying to stop this.
And Canada.
And Canada, right? Yeah. We would be with them. Whatever would be going on with Iran policy would not even hold out the possibility that America would either tacitly or expressly back is an Israeli operation to take out the nuclear infrastructure if the deal fails. And the attempt to root out anti-Semitism in America's institutions of higher learning and to apply the civil rights law, which is what Leo Terrell is saying, the law that's on the books, apply it to include Jews, that would not be happening.
Right. I want to just finish again with a little personal thing here, which is my son goes every day to a Jewish institution to go to school. We go every weekend to a synagogue on the Sabbath for morning services. These are institutions in an open city in New York. with a very bad DA, who doesn't want to prosecute anybody, and all of that. And what is going to happen over the next couple of days? That my school is going to have to be hardened. Our shul is going to have to be hardened. I have to think about certain types of things, like I'm supposed to speak at an all-night event in a couple of weeks on the holiday of Shavuot, where it is a tradition that Jews study all night. It's called the Tikkun, and this is a very open event in New York City, and I'm not sure that we should go. I'm not sure that this event should take place. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, you don't want to hide, and you need to be resolute and tough, and you can't let them stop you. Keep shopping after 9/11. But I mean, this is not a keep shopping after 9/11. It's literally a thing where prudence dictates that you don't just stand and provide a target for somebody who can run up to wherever you are and basically provide a bullseye for a bullet. Like this is what the reality is right after what happened last night. I'm thinking about my son. I'm thinking about my synagogue. I'm thinking about a community center that will celebrate this holiday where we celebrate the giving of the Torah at Sinai to Moses.
I think the 9/11 analogy is perfect, because you were confronted at that time with those very fears, and the consideration was, well, we're surrounded by soft targets. We have to either harden every soft target, make those targets of opportunity, shopping malls, grocery stores, churches, synagogues, all of them impregnable fortresses, and militarize American life, or you go at the source and you stop terrorism from the font from which it springs. And that's what we're confronted with now. Right. And as you said in a reply to Jake Sherman, there are steps you can take in order to go on the offense. And now's the time for offense.
Noah Rothman, thanks so much for joining us on this extraordinarily sad day. For Matt and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.